Good morning. How you all doing? I apologize in advance for using such an aggressive title to try and bring you in to spend a few moments with me this morning before you get on about your busy day. I'm preparing to cook some sourdough breads. It's part of my rest, I guess therapy you would call it, and people enjoy it. People like it. And to make those, I have to use ingredients and I have to use instructions. Guidance, mind you, to hopefully end up with a beautiful product, a perfect product that people will enjoy for the short time that it's here, because any natural breads and sourdough breads don't have a shelf life much more than a few days, so they have to be used up. But I use a recipe, and as I was preparing to do this, something came to mind as I was waking up, and I was praying, and I was taking some time hearing the word, listening to the word. I came out and I looked at my instructions, and I know that I've had many failures in the past. And if any of you like wasting products, like, food to try and make something and it doesn't turn out, it's not a fun thing. So we research and we dedicate our time to find the very best means to achieve success at the end of the day when it's cooking. And I found, for me to do that, especially in sourdough baking, more so than any other baking when it comes to sourdoughs, having a good starter. And that starter has ingredients, flour and water. And if I mix the proper flour and water together for the longest amount of time, and I leave it open in the air to grab all the yeast and stuff in the air, it will create a wild ferment, a yeast that, if you feed correctly, should look something like this in preparation for baking. Bubbly, airy. If I put mix any more ingredients in with that, any more flour, that too will rise and get bubbly and airy. And the end product that I cook should be nice and spongy and bubbly and airy. Well, how do I achieve success in that? Well, let's look at those ingredients for a minute. We have third cup of flour, all-purpose flour, 3.5. We have a tablespoon of this, a little bit of that, and so on and so forth. Now, it obviously says it's 1 tablespoon. It says 1 cup or a third cup. I can use these general numbers and possibly achieve a good mix. But it depends on a variety of things that we don't tend to think about when we start opening up the can of worms called baking sourdough. That means that the pressure outside, the dampness outside, our elevation, all these things take precedence in regards. So what somebody did a long time ago, and I'm sure it's much longer than the people who wrote this, is they wrote down the weights. And I'll show you this real quick. If we look, it says 1 tablespoon or 15 grams. Third cup or 1 tablespoon, 50 grams. And it goes on to tell me 50 grams of water. It goes on to tell me 240 grams of milk. If I add these by the weight, so if I scale all this stuff down, the chance likely 100%. The reason why I know that's because I use it by scale all the time, and every time I use a scale, my bread comes out wonderful. If I just go by the cup, if it's a beautiful day outside and there's not much pressure and everything's sort of perfect, on the other side, meaning the world's perfect, my bread will turn out good. Otherwise, the bread's not going to turn out good at all. What am I talking about today? This ingredients that I use, this recipe, Bob's sourdough dinner rolls. If I do it perfectly to his instructions, they're still Bob's dinner rolls. And I'm enjoying Bob's dinner roll. Thank you, Bob. But if I modify it in any way, shape, or form, if I add anything or take away anything from the ingredients, it's no longer Bob's dinner rolls, but it's mine. And I accept the responsibility for how well it turns out or how poorly it turns out. I can't blame Bob anymore, can I? We have another book. We're all familiar with this book. It's the Bible. Holy Bible. And we like to think that there's a ton of recipes in this book. There's only one. One that's the same yesterday, today, and forever. We like to think we can modify it and then blame God for it. We like to think that we can change every aspect of the recipe. The very truth, the only truth, and call it truth, when it's a variation of truth, which is simply just a lie. How do we do this? Well, since medieval times, we have actual words for it. The Hebrews called it a parody, and I'm going to bring you down into this and read them so you can understand. These are the ones I'm familiar with. This New Day, Age, and Age stuff I'm not. So these parodies, these are the acronyms. The Peshat, which is a literal meaning. The Remez, a hint, or veiled allusion. The Drash, Paul liked the Drash. He used Midrash, which was like a third person. Homiletical interpretation. And then the Sod, which is mystery, or aesthetic interpretation. This is what a lot of belief systems use these days, the Sod, which is a mystery. Everything has a mystery behind it. Supernatural, that they can glean from if they just figure it out. But that's an interpretation of our scriptures. In fact, what we did is we made thousands and thousands of recipes off one recipe and called it all good. Called it the best recipe. The best recipe was before sin. That's right, friends and neighbors, brothers and sisters. The best recipe was the garden. God's intention for his creation. The intention, how he wanted his bread to turn out. Somebody came in and messed that up. Easily changing the recipe. Our choice to change the recipe, to make it fit us, to fit our desire, our likes, not God's likes. Which leads to the new form of interpretation we use today, the one widely used and thought of as wisdom, which is this one. And I don't even know if there's a name for it because I didn't know this was here past what I just read to you. The several ways, including word for word, thought for thought, paraphrase and dynamic equivalence. Translation methods is word for word. I guess that would be the same as the Peshat, which is a literal meaning. Jesus got up and sat down on a stone. His disciples sat down next to him. That's a literal thing. You can't take much more out of it. Thought for thought, a translation that aims to capture the meaning of the Bible. Well, I guess the meaning in him sitting down on a stone and the disciples sitting next to him was preparing him to speak. So I guess that would sort of mean a hint or allusion or a remez, the direction in which the story is going. I would stick for word there. Paraphrase, a translation that aims to make the Bible easier to understand by using more modern language. That's not a drash, that's basically us trying to make it fit into our times instead of us trying to fit into their times. And this one is the scariest, the dramatic equivalence. A translation that takes into account the intended audience and aims to make the Bible more accessible. That would be for this day and age. That means that would include our feelings and our emotions and how it affects our lives. And if it crosses a certain line, it can't possibly mean Jesus thought it up or God thought it up. That it must be a bad recipe. You see, the Bible itself, you can maybe contest. Well, Matt, and then the blood of Jesus doesn't mean anything. And all these things are not new. They don't mean anything. Well, the intention was for God to spend eternity with his creation in the garden. I see grace since the very beginning, since Jesus' blood covers us. Like God, slaughtering an animal to cover us in the garden. Because we became aware of our sin. Because we added to his recipe and called it good. We'll not surely die. In fact, we'll know what he does. And we're still using that same recipe. We won't surely die. In fact, we're helping him out. We'll be just like him. We'll be able to take part, be more valuable. When it comes to scaling, whatever way you want to take the Bible, today I'm using it as a recipe book, a one recipe book with a whole lot of instructions on how not to end up making a bad batch of life for you, your family, loved ones. However you want to take it, know that there's only one truth. And we need to take every thought that we have, every interpretation, every ingredient that we just choosing to add to it. And we need to put it on a scale. That would be God's scale before sin. And make sure that it measures up. Because if it doesn't measure up, then it ain't part of God's recipe. Part of your recipe. And you will hear, Lord, Lord, I did all these things in your name. Depart from me. I never knew you. Doers of lawlessness. That's what you will hear. God's recipe is clear. Every thought that we come up with from every little story and every little thing that we think is mysterious and every little thing that we think we translated right or wrong, or every little thing that doesn't matter. Everything that we can put up against it, our whole life has to be equaled to the recipe from the beginning. Because God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Love you.